Canadian auto workers took part in a rally today to try and keep a General Motors plant open in Oshawa, Ontario. The demonstration happened in Windsor. Here's a fired-up Unifor president telling the crowd they're not giving up the fight.
And we are demanding that the Prime Minister, the Premier of Ontario, and myself, in a meeting organized by the Prime Minister and the Premier.
The rally took place just across the river from the company's Detroit headquarters. Workers are protesting GM's plan to close its major Canadian plant at the end of the year. Now, that move will put 2,500 people out of work. Unifor brought in thousands of members from across Ontario by bus for the rally on Windsor's riverfront. The union is hoping the protests will push GM to reverse its decision. Here's CBC's Olivia Stefanovic with more.
As executives at General Motors headquarters in Detroit met with investors this morning, Canadian auto workers gathered here across the river for a counter-meeting of sorts, a rally to show the company they're not letting the Oshawa plant close without a fight. They came by the busloads, picking up signs, flags, and T-shirts.
It was an easy decision, 100%. I'm supposed to be at work this afternoon. Obviously, I'm not going in. I won't be back in time, but it was an easy decision. It's because you have to show solidarity. The only way to beat these corporate greedy people.
Generations of General Motors workers who say they feel betrayed.
It's a bag of mixed emotions, you know. It's everybody's there supporting one another, but at the end of the day, it's scared. I mean, where there's fear and anxiety, panic, you know, uncertainty.
They took their frustration out at a demonstration organized by their union, Unifor.
Sell here!
But GM says its decision is final, part of a global restructuring plan, a move towards building self-driving and electric vehicles.
We've told the union numerous times that the decision will stand because we've looked at all the alternatives, and financially and economically they don't work. We've reviewed all of their submissions and they only increased the costs.
Just as the demonstration got underway, the company announced profits for 2018 are higher than expected. Still, not enough to save 2,500 jobs in Oshawa. The union calls that corporate greed. Unifor isn't giving up. It's calling for a meeting with the CEO of GM, the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, despite GM's insistence that there's nothing that can be done. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Windsor, Ontario.
So tonight we're asking, is there more Ottawa and Ontario should be doing to try and save those jobs? Well, here to answer those questions, joining us from Ottawa is freelance columnist Susan Riley. Hey, Susan.
Hey, Natasha.
And from Calgary, we've got North Weather Vice President of Strategy, Zane Velji. How you doing, Zane?
Hey, Natasha, how are you?
And check it out, right next to you is News Talk 770 host Rob Breckenridge. How are you, Rob?
Good evening, thanks.
Okay, Susan, I'm going to begin with you. The union says, not good enough, we need more, we're not going anywhere, get us our jobs back. What do you say?
I say that Jerry Dias can hold his breath until he's blue in the face, and General Motors is not going to change its mind. I think in this case, no really does mean no. As you will recall, Premier Ford went to see the GM people immediately after it was announced in December, the shutdown, or November, I can't remember exactly, I think it was November. You know, certainly federal ministers and the Prime Minister, they've reached out, and I think it's a fait accompli, and I cannot see any reversal in the cards at all.
Is this an exercise in futility, Zane?
I mean, listen, a lot of times the policy ramification or imperative and the political one are different. And I think that's exactly what we see here for Justin Trudeau. Let's just think about the paradox this is, right? In many ways, GM's presence in Canada, specifically Oshawa, has happened primarily due to corporate welfare. So when you have unions now pushing to make sure GM comes back, well, what are you going to offer? Well, corporate welfare. And what led to the demise? Well, I think it's corporate welfare. So the paradox that Trudeau has to face right now is, especially out of Ottawa, as to what to do. By the way, the two of us sit here in Calgary, you know, well aware of what job losses look like as the hollowing out of our downtown here over a span of a couple of years happened rapidly. I feel like the policy, imperative for Trudeau is no, let's not do anything. Let the market decide. At the same time, I think there's a political imperative that would say that, he should probably figure out if he can keep his left flank, and this is a great way to do it. So I'm conflicted in many ways, where the policy says no, but the politics might say a green light for stepping in and ensuring that, T-minus less than a year from election, this might be a great way to shore up that left flank.
What do you think, Rob?
Well, I mean, first of all, it sounds like Jerry Dias is getting ready for his big match at WrestleMania.
I love that. It's like Howard Dean running for the DNC.
Look, the problem here is that GM isn't looking for a bailout. They're not looking for any kind of handout. Right. They're trying to restructure in a way that they feel best positions them to move forward. It's potentially really counterproductive to step in and say, no, you can't do that, or no, it has to be this way. I mean, what Jerry Dias has suggested is really, I think, a dangerous path to go down, where, if they're not going to build these cars here, that they don't get to sell cars here. So is that the kind of intervention? That's pretty drastic. I mean, keep in mind, look, I mean, GM does have an established presence here. Oshawa is not even the biggest GM plant in Ontario. GM just recently as well, they opened a technology center in Mississauga. That's got about 500 people. That's going to grow to 1,000. These companies are trying to figure out what works best for them. And I think it's really dangerous for governments to step in and say, look, right now is exactly how it needs to stay forever and ever. That's not going to work out well for anybody in the long run.
And can I just add, Natasha, one of the things here that I'm seeing with these protests, and by the way, if we look across the country right now, this is not the only protest going on. We're looking at a convoy of trucks going to Ottawa. We're looking at protests over everything. And I feel like a lot of this, especially the ones directed to the federal government, are rooted in emotion and are rooted in the fact that people have made up their mind. Rob right here presents a great fact. This is not the largest GM plant in the entire country. Let's try explaining that to anyone on the picket lines today. No one would want to listen. This is about emotional entrenchment and then rational sort of justification on the back end. And I think this is where it's becoming really dangerous, where, whether it's here in Calgary that we've seen these protests or out in Oshawa, people are emotionally entrenching, which makes it very difficult for a government to then say, here's the facts though, here's why it should be this way. People are effectively impenetrable when they've made these decisions in such a manner.
I just saw Susan have such a reaction. What's going on, Susan?
Of course they're emotional. They're facing the loss of their job. They're being uprooted from their community. Give them that.
I think it's futile. That, though, right?
No, hold on. Go ahead, Susan.
I mean, I think the protests are futile, but I don't condemn them for feeling upset. Of course they're upset. Listen, the time for the government to intervene was in 2009. When Chrysler and GM, facing bankruptcy, came to the Ontario and federal government pleading for money, wanting to basically be bailed out. They were bailed out to the tune of $13 billion. And I remember at that time writing a column, actually. I hate to quote myself, but I do remember writing a column saying, look, if you're going to, and I can understand the economic case for advancing that support, but put some strings on it. Insist that these automakers start making the cars of the future and stop making the cars of the past. Try to get at least some more investment here in innovative cars. I mean, if that had have happened, who knows? The Oshawa plant might be churning out electric vehicles. Apparently it's too big right now for the existing market for electric vehicles, but that's going to change. I'm positive that's going to change. I think a big opportunity was missed back then. I don't think you can roll it back now. I think the bottom line is, as the GM people were saying, is that there's a diminishing market for the vehicle types, the larger kind of cars that were being built in Oshawa. The plant's already tooled, which has been there since 1918, by the way, but it's already tooled. The assembly line is tooled to handle that kind of vehicle. You can't fight the market by just keeping these elephants alive.
Rob, final question to you about the political impact of this, because we've seen for the Prime Minister, he's run into trouble in BC and in Alberta when it comes to the oil sands, when it comes to the pipelines, all those concerns, differing concerns, but certainly a lot of pushback against him. And now potentially in Southern Ontario, pushback on another industry that feels it's not being protected. Is this something he's going to have to pay for if he doesn't do more to protect these jobs?
Yeah, there's a political irony in that this is the Prime Minister at the moment is enjoying, I think we have the lowest unemployment rates in 40 years, but the job losses could become a big issue for him. There's a real political sensitivity. There always has been with manufacturing jobs in southwestern Ontario, and in particular automobile jobs. I mean, there's some question about the future of our armored vehicle contract with Saudi Arabia. That's a lot of jobs in London. Now there's obviously some pending job losses in Oshawa. I think this does create some political problems for him, but there's no easy and obvious answer for him. There's no way necessarily for the Prime Minister to wave a magic wand and say, I've saved these jobs.
Okay.
I also think that it's a different...
Very quickly, Susan, sorry.
It's a different environment in southwestern Ontario. There are a fair number of jobs available so far, at least, and there are alternatives for some of these people who've been displaced.
Okay, I'm sure we'll have opportunities to talk about this again in the future. Susan, Zane, and Rob, thank you all so much for joining us and being part of our panel tonight.
Thanks, Natasha.